have been some demonstrations at this early hour in downtown Chicago's Grant Park. We heard a moment ago that tear gas has been used as the demonstrators are attempting to form a line of parade and march toward or on the amphitheater.
Some of the demonstration leaders saying, keep your cool.
And happy Sunday, and welcome to The Deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It is Sunday, the 18th of August, 2024. And if you're watching us on the video podcast, you don't see the backdrop for The Deal because I'm in a hotel in Topeka, Kansas. I'm not in my normal spot, so I don't have all my stuff. So I don't have all the fancy lights and all the other stuff. So hopefully that won't be a distraction. But Val Atkinson is here. He's in his normal spot. Hey, Val.
Hello, Ed. I am.
Well, Val, number one, it's hot as Hades here in the middle of Kansas, in Oklahoma. It's where I've been the last week, and I'll probably be here for another 3-4 days. Lord have mercy, get me back to North Carolina. But on top of that, Val, not only hasn't been hot, 110 a few days. The other night, right behind me, the neighborhood right behind me got hit by I don't know if it was a tornado or some straight line winds. So when I left the hotel the next morning, there were trees all over the places and cars turned over and all kind of stuff. I woke up in the middle of the night and heard all this banging going on, and I went back to sleep. And I get up in the morning, it's total chaos outside. So, but the hotel was brand new, so it's standing pretty strong. So I was fortunate that nothing happened. So hopefully all those people behind me made it okay. And of course, there's been storms in the Atlantic as well. So people are getting a lot of rain, and I guess there's been heat all over most of the United States. So I hope everybody's doing good. But Val, we got a lot to talk about today. Of course, we're going to talk about the presidential election, but I want to go overseas first before we get too far down the road today, because there's a couple of major stories I think that are really important. And one is Ukraine has actually made an incursion into Russia. And for the longest time, we've been concerned that, that Russian invasion of Ukraine was going to spill over and maybe get to Poland or Romania, places like that, or drag other people into the war. But it appears to me that not only the Ukrainians holding their own, they're actually, maybe on the upside here. My take on it has always been that Russia is a weak country anyway. People are afraid of Russia because who Russia used to be, right? Which was the Soviet Union, which they're not anymore. Tell me what you know about this incursion into Russia by the Ukrainians, and how does that change the calculus on all of this?
Well, they've made an incursion and they captured several dozen, if not hundreds, of Russian soldiers and military personnel. And a lot of people watching this whole Ukrainian piece very closely think that this is going to be a bargaining tool for Ukraine if and when it gets to the point that negotiations seem to be the only way out. That they'll say, okay, we got some hostages here. Not only that, we're 100 miles into your land. So let's put that on the bargaining table. Let's see how that works out. I don't think there are very many people who feel that Russia is really threatened by Ukraine, that they're not going to take over Moscow next week. We must remember that Russia also has somewhere upwards of 6,600 nuclear weapons. And these are big things, nuclear weapons nowadays. It's not like the little small atomic bomb that dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki back at the end of World War II. One of these hydrogen bombs that Russia has is 1,000 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. So it's nothing to play with. You're talking about 6,600 of these weapons I don't care how good the US's air defense system is. If you stop 99% of those weapons coming through, 1% is enough to kill everything and everybody. So let's make sure we understand where we are with Russia and whether or not it's still the Soviet Union or not, as you clearly pointed out. But Ukraine has no sense of taking Moscow or anything like that. Most people think it's going to be another peg that they can put on the table when it gets to the point of negotiations.
Well, that's mighty sobering when you talk about how many more times powerful a weapon is, but compared to the one that hit Hiroshima or Nagasaki. I mean, that is one of the things I think that's kept people from using them. Is everybody knows that everybody's going to be dead, so what's the point? So here's the interesting sort of corollary that we need to take into consideration here is that Donald Trump still talks very highly of Vladimir Putin. And the whole Republican Party has pretty much done this whole thing where they've said that they don't really want to support Ukraine, but Joe Biden has quietly continued to provide arms or whatever, and now Ukraine has maybe got to the point where they're going to keep Russia at least back to their old border. They're not going to make incursions into Ukraine. I haven't heard the Trump campaign or many Republicans talk much about foreign policy lately. Have you heard anybody say anything about the success of the Ukrainians fighting against the Russians from the Republican side?
Not a whisper, Ed. That's not something they want to talk about. They're still grappling right now with what sticks. They've thrown a lot of stuff up against the wall against the, Harris-Waltz campaign, but they can't find anything that sticks. And foreign policy is definitely not one of them. They are trying to control Donald Trump because he gets off message and goes back to insulting people. So foreign policy is the last thing that I think they want to hang their hat on in this one. They don't have anything they can say. If you want to talk about the foreign policy things that Donald Trump was involved in when he was president, if you want to talk about the so-called relationship that he has with Putin, that's nothing that everybody wants. He does not want to talk about foreign policy, anything about foreign policy. And that should be something that he can talk about because neither Harris nor Waltz has an extensive foreign policy background. Harris has a little bit because she was vice president, but it was limited to what the president wanted her to have. So that should be something they should be talking about night and day, but they can't because they can't control Donald Trump. They can't depend upon him staying on message.
Well, no, he can't stay on message, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But here's another foreign policy problem that I think Harris may have. Let's take a look at a clip of the Israelis talking about occupying Gaza.
Good morning. No, I think these negotiations have been almost doomed to fail from the start. For the very reason that the Israeli government the government of Mr. Netanyahu doesn't really have an intention to conclude a new agreement, and the gap between the what Hamas requires and what the Israeli government wants is too big for these negotiations to lead anywhere, and that's why they have been stalled for so long.
So what exactly then do we know about what is on the table? All sides warning that a lot of work remains given the complexity of this agreement.
Well, basically, the captives or the hostages that Hamas is holding in the Gaza Strip are the last and only practically card that Hamas has. and they want to get something in exchange. And that something is basically what they need, which is a real and permanent ceasefire, an end to hostilities, and what they have requested, the withdrawal of Israeli troops from the Gaza Strip. But that is a non-starter for the Israeli government. And that's why it's almost, I mean, one could say, unfortunately, that these negotiations seem very much to have been a kind of waste of time.
So, Val, something that we warned about from the beginning, that Israeli incursions into Palestine have always resulted in, or almost always resulted in, them occupying territory and then not giving it back. Then they put settlements on it, blah, blah, blah. And then this thing just is interminable. It keeps going on and on. And the reason why is because Americans will not criticize Israeli incursions because they say they're protecting themselves, right? But nobody ever talks about protecting the Palestinians, but that's neither here nor there. You've moved all these people out, and now in the clip we just saw, they're talking about permanently occupying the southern part of Gaza, bordering Egypt, which, you know, I don't know how old people are, but I remember being a kid, and there was always this question about would Israel return the Sinai Peninsula after the incursion they made there, and so on and so forth, and how that kept the whole region, you know, in turmoil for years. What is Israel's plan about occupying southern Gaza? Is it going to stick? Is there anything we could do about it, really, if they decide not to leave?
Well, I think Israel right now, Ed, is on the verge of exposing a long-term Western strategy and goal regarding the Middle East. We've always seen, when I say we, I'm talking about the West. The West has always seen the Middle East as a target, a goal to have that place westernized. And when I say westernized, I'm talking about how we westernize places like Hong Kong. That's a great example. How we westernize places like Japan. Japan is looked upon now as one of the great Western economic and industrial powers on the planet. But it wasn't always that way. It was an Eastern Asian country with a lot of history and culture into Asian and Eastern society. And now it is gone so far west that we don't even bother about it. We have baseball games over there. We now have great baseball players in the major leagues from Japan, and Japan is doing great things in sports and other ways. And we've totally westernized that particular country. So that has been a goal of the West for a long, long time, since 1945. See how many countries, that's how we got to the Philippines, and that was one of the reasons we were in Vietnam and Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, that has been one of the things. Israel understands this, and that's why we give Israel so much sway. We allow them to do so many things because we know Israel is the West's foray into the Middle East to change them to become a Western culture. That's what they're trying to do. And they've made some advances. You take a look at Libya, you take a look at Egypt, you take a look at Jordan. They are far more westernized now than they were 40, 50 years ago, and still moving to the right to become more westernized, but they're not moving fast enough. This is the reason the United States will do nothing to stop Israel from what she's doing, because she's toting our water for us. She is helping to westernize the Middle East. And people need to understand that. That's where it's coming from. And that's why we're taking the positions that we do. I hope that it doesn't hamper the election in the United States on November the 5th. I hope that the protests in Chicago by the progressive branch of the Democratic Party doesn't spill over into something crazy, and it doesn't get to the point that certain people say, well, I'm not going to vote for Trump, but I am going to withhold my vote to show the Biden-Harris folks that I don't like what you guys are doing in Israel.
Yeah.
And that would be devastating for us, because like you said, whatever we do, we can't let Trump back in the White House.
Yeah, and that's my main goal, is to make sure he doesn't get back in there. But what's problematic is this position on allowing Israel to occupy parts of Palestine for long periods of time and never return the land, always under the guise that it's for the protection of the Israelis, when in fact on the Western side, like you said, part of it is, and I think the biggest part of it is wanting to westernize the whole world, that we don't see people as civilized unless they buy Coca-Cola. Right? Yeah. You know, let's get down to brass tacks. Let's be honest about this. That's what it's about. But the other part of it is, and I'm going to have a religious scholar. There's a guy named Bart Ehrman who lives in our area that I'd like to get on sometime. He's a religious scholar, but he talks about authenticity of Jesus and that kind of thing. A lot of this has to do with evangelicals' belief that Jesus got to come back, and he needs to come back in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And the only way is to prop up that state of Israel, cause a conflagration, and then there'll be Armageddon, and then there'll be peace for 1,000 years, whatever, blah, 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 whatever the biblical view is. And right now, on this Sunday morning, while we record this, somewhere in a church in Kansas up the street from me, I'm sure there's a preacher saying this exact thing. But it's also a preacher in North Carolina somewhere at a black church that's probably saying the same message. And contextually, it makes no sense, right? You're saying that the whole world is riding on this Jewish rabbi who got crucified so many years ago. Us propping up Israel has something to do with that. But people say it with a straight face all the time.
Oh yeah, all the time.
And now, again, I don't try to step on people's toes. My friends at McLean's Chapel Free Will Baptist Church in Belleville, North Carolina, where I'm a member. I don't want them to be mad at me, but there's something about when that creeps into our politics that's problematic. Anyway, I hear some music in my ear. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the convention that's coming up for the Democrats and what Kamala Harris has to do to solidify her position and make this a foregone conclusion for her to win. Or is it a foregone conclusion? I don't know. The polls seem to say that, but we know how we feel about polls. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
Us MAGA Republicans banned abortion, but that's just the start.
That's just the start.
If Trump gets elected, we want the government involved in all aspects of your sex life.
Way more involved.
Way more involved.
When you have sexual intercourse, it should be illegal to use contraception. No pills, no condoms.
Your genitals are reserved for procreation.
If you freeze 12 eggs, you should be required to have 12 babies, or else you're a serial killer. And I'm definitely not a serial killer.
Are you?
My son monitors my porn usage to make sure I'm not self-pleasuring.
Just like Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. That's true, you can look it up.
Don't you think that's normal?
Yeah, I do.
It's normal for your son to do that.
You should have a family member monitor your porn use too.
Because pleasuring yourself is very, very naughty.
I'm voting in November.
I'm voting in November. We're all voting in November. Are you?
Because what happens in your bedroom is up to me.
Is up to me and my son. Also, mouth stuff is a sin.
Good morning. Organizers are planning on packing the loop later this afternoon for the first planned protest taking place before the Democratic National Convention even officially gets underway. The permitted protest will take demonstrators from Michigan to the Logan statue by East 9th Street and then into Grant Park. That's about a mile and a half from their starting point. The protest is called the March for Bodies Outside Unjust Laws. Organizers say they are protesting the Democratic Party's failure to live up to its rhetoric in favor of reproductive and LGBTQ rights. They're going to be rallying along with those calling for an end to the conflict in Gaza. Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth says she expects these protests to be safe and orderly.
We very much are welcoming people to express their right to freedom of speech. And in fact, there will be an area that protesters can be in to express themselves. We even created a march route, a parade route, so that people can actually mount protest marches if that's what they want to do. We're going to do this in a safe and orderly manner. They're going to be peaceful protests, and we welcome them.
And welcome back to our second segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. It's Sunday, August the 18th, 2024. I'm in lovely Topeka, Kansas. Lots of cows, cornfields, oil wells. I've been in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and stopped in lovely Perry, Oklahoma yesterday. The home of Ditch Witch. So if you guys do any construction, the company that makes the things that dig up your yard, Ditch Witch, they're in Perry, Oklahoma. Val, you know me, I'm a history kind of dude. So I was like, Oklahoma City was not the state capital of Oklahoma when it first started. It was a place called Guthrie, Oklahoma. So I said, well, let me stop in Guthrie, Oklahoma. And the original state capital is still in Guthrie. And it's a very nice building. But you can tell that nothing ever happens there in Guthrie, Oklahoma. It looks like a sleepy little town, maybe a few thousand people. And it has this big state capitol building sitting in the middle that nobody uses. But I like history and I like going to places. So I also rode through the Osage, up to the Osage Indian Reservation. There was a movie called Killers of the Flower Moon last year about how white folks came in and tried to kill off all the Indians to steal their oil. And right now, right on the edge of Osage Reservation, you mainly see casinos, but you see a lot of oil wells too. So I like getting out in the country and going places. So, but speaking of the country, the United States of America is at a sort of crossroads, Val. There's a convention coming up. The Democrats are going to be in Chicago. 1968 was not a good year for Democrats in Chicago. If you go back and look at the video from that, a lot of violence going on. I think Mayor Daley went overboard he was telling the police to shoot to kill people, whatever. It was crazy. But it was in the midst of a very violent time in America. Martin Luther King was assassinated in April. Bobby Kennedy had been assassinated after he had won the California primary. And people were not above assassinating people in the United States at that point on a regular, in addition to the violence just in general. We are not in a violent time like that, despite that assassination attempt on Donald Trump. We're just not in that much turmoil. Let's put it that way. And one of the reasons, Val, I think, is because we're pretty rich. We got a lot of shit, right? and people don't want to give up their stuff, right? So most people have, stuff that you could not imagine having in 1968. Having a color TV that wasn't 12 inches was a miracle. Yeah. All these iPhones and stuff we had. Now, I know I'm sounding like an old man. I guess I need to get a rocking chair for this segment from now on and get in the rocking chair and talk about how we used to walk 20 miles to school and all that stuff. But Val, here's the thing. If you look at the economic numbers, things look good. The inflation is down. Interest rates will probably come down. And we'll talk about some of the economic speeches the candidates have made. But going into the convention, you almost can't paint a better picture for the Democrats. But right before the break, we talked about this whole thing with Gaza. Will that be enough to tip over all the good stuff that Kamala Harris and the Democrats can talk about at the convention, or are they going to be insulated because people are just sick of Donald Trump? What's going to happen at the convention? What's your prognostication?
My prognostication is that people are so sick of Donald Trump, they won't let anything spoil what could be a very good convention and a pathway to an election on November the 5th. They won't let that happen. There are legitimate concerns, however, on the part of many progressives within the Democratic Party that things are going awry in the Middle East. They don't like what Israel is doing. They don't like what's happening to the Palestinians. They don't like what Israel has planned for Palestinians, for the Egyptians, for the entire Middle East. They don't like that. They see a creeping thing going on that is akin to what Hitler and the Nazis did. And it's so ironic that the Jews, as we know them now in Israel, was a product of what Hitler had done in Germany. And for those people in the Jewish administration, everyday average Jews, for them to behave in some of the ways that we see doing, the rape of hostages and those kind of things, it's unbelievable. Of all of the people on the planet, Jews should be the last ones to treat people badly simply because of their race or nationality. They should be the last ones to do that because they know what it's like to be treated that way as a people. So this is something that the progressives within the Democratic Party are going to try to show the Biden-Harris administration and the Harris-Walz ticket that they are not satisfied with. And they are going to want answers as to what are you going to do, Mr. Biden, between now and January the 20th? And what are you going to do, Ms. Harris, if you are elected after January 20th about this Israeli Middle Eastern problem? They want some answers. And we haven't heard anything yet except, well, we will defer to Mr. Netanyahu. And that's not a good answer.
No, that is not a good answer. He should not be the one that's telling us how we should approach this foreign policy wise. But like I said earlier, the issue that Americans have is part of it is our bent towards Western Christianity, which says that it's supposed to be like this, right? That it's supposed to end in some sort of conflagration and there's no way around it. So a lot of people are just resigned to that. Then you got young people who are saying, hey, wait a minute, let's do the right thing. And young people tend to protest. They tend to go in the street. They tend to throw rocks at police. They tend to have sit-ins. I mean, that is how things move, though. It is that there's always a faction that believes in, confrontational politics that will move things. My guess, this is my prognostication, Val. My guess is that there will be some provocateurs there that will, try to push the envelope, because there has to be. There always is. There has to be, particularly on the Democratic side since 1960. I would say 1964, because you can even think about Fannie Lou Hamer in the Freedom Democrats, who they were the first incursion of Negroes into the Democratic Party. And Fannie Lou Hamer goes there and they try to get the delegation seated. Now, they didn't do a whole bunch in terms of confrontation with the police, but they went to committees and they spoke and they said what they believed, right? Which is that has been part and parcel for the Democrats, is that you always have people in the party that don't always agree. On the Republican side, at the Republican convention, you saw people doing what they typically done since 1964, which is coalesce around these supposed family value ideas and restricting people's rights ideas and making fun of people, that kind of stuff. So it's a clear distinction between the two parties. I think there'll be way better speeches at the Democratic convention because there always is. And then the little skinny black guy, Barack Obama, he's going to be making a speech. Bill Clinton's making a speech. Hillary Clinton is speaking. You have a plethora of people who can speak on the Democratic side. I hope that what goes on inside the hall trumps, see how I use that, trumps what goes on outside on the street. I do believe people have a right to protest because I don't like U.S. policy in Palestine, but I hope it doesn't unseat all the good stuff that I think could happen if we could just get rid of Trump once and for all. So anyway, I will put a pin in that. I want to remind everybody you're listening to The Deal with Ed Carton, Val Atkinson. It's a Sunday, August 18th. Val is a former political science professor at North Carolina Central University. So I tug on him all the time for historical context and also media politics and that kind of thing, because he taught a class for a long time on that. And Val, one of the things, so here's your media politics question for this week. Who's winning the battle of appearance in the media? Right now, nobody seems to be happy that Kamala hasn't sat down for an interview, and they made a lot of hay about that. I don't see why the hell she needs to. But as a political strategist in your life, you've been one of those. You've been also a person who's produced political commercials, and then you've also taught about this. Is that the right approach for Harris at this point, that she hasn't had a sit-down interview with one of these media outlets, even though they keep clamoring for it?
Well, this is a battle between Harris and the media. It's the media who want her to sit down for a wide open type of interview because they are looking for higher ratings. That's all they want. I mean, they're looking for something to come out of that interview that they can hang their hat on, that will produce drama, that will produce some kind of subject matter that everybody will be talking about for the next few weeks to come. Maybe even something that will change the whole direction of the campaign. So that's why they want this to happen. They are interested in higher ratings so they can make more ad dollars. The higher the ratings, of course, the more money you can charge for your ads. So that's what they want. What the Harris administration campaign has got to do is to ensure that she's not being set up, that she is not going into one of those type interviews and come out to it, go into that interview 4 or 5 points ahead of Trump and come out of it 2 or 3 points behind because of a slip up here or there, uncovering of this, another thing. But that's what the media wants. The media is looking for that one thing that sticks up against the wall that they can talk about for the next few weeks between now and November the 5th. So this is a battle between Harris and the media. Are you going to tie me down and make me give you something to talk about? Or are you going to allow us to continue with this campaign and give the American people what they need? Yeah. And we'll see what happens.
Well,
it's a battle. It's a big battle.
It is. Here's the other part of that, Val, is, again, they're clamoring for her to do this interview. The convention is right here. They'll get plenty of news from the convention. There's nothing she needs to say, but they have been on the stump. That's Harris and Walz. They've been on the stump, and Harris has been, with him most of the time. But he's now Walz has started to do his own events. He was in Pennsylvania. They're putting a lot of effort in Pennsylvania. But guess where they were again this week, Val? They were in North Carolina. Both Donald Trump and Harris. And they both supposedly were going to give speeches about the economy. Donald Trump couldn't hold his thought for 5 seconds. He was back to bashing Kamala Harris, calling her stupid and everything else, which I don't think is useful, from his point of view, but that's the kind of people that support him. They like to hear that kind of stuff. So he gave no economic policy positions or whatever. Harris, however, in Raleigh, again, full house. And she talked about some things that the Biden administration have done, like lowered 10 more prescription prices on the 10 top expensive prescriptions, at least for the Medicare, which will save multiple billions of dollars in Medicare. Also reducing some co-payments for people that are on Medicare. Some real tangible things, right? And Trump has nothing other than standing in front of some Cheerio boxes and some rotten meat. I think his point was that things are high, and maybe things are high, but Harris, on the other hand, said things are high because companies charge what the hell they want. We say it here all the time, Val. We've been talking about it, I know, with you for 30 years about how prices are artificially set and they're conglomerates that control every damn thing. And there's 2 or 3 companies that do that make every product that you have, and they collude to set prices. So when they tell you something is expensive, it's expensive because they make it expensive. So Harris even talked about that. How can you get at, controlling some of these prices? Talk to me in the time we got left in this segment about the dueling presentations of Harris and Trump in North Carolina, because it seems to be they both believe that North Carolina is going to be one of those linchpins to winning this all. Because I know I need to talk to you in the final segment about the Trump's real strategy, which is not to win this at the ballot box at all. So who's winning the battle here of presentation and in North Carolina in particular? And then if Trump doesn't win in North Carolina, he's got problems, doesn't he?
Sure, he's got a problem. I mean, we got 16 electoral college votes here, and he needs every one of them to make it happen. He doesn't want to take all state anyway. But, I want to get back to the essence of your question in terms of who's winning the conversation here about the pricing and the inflation and this and that and so forth. I think right now the Democrats are winning it because they're not getting down in the weeds with the Republicans. Republicans have never liked getting down into the weeds except to find that one little issue that when you get down in the weeds and you're throwing 1,000 things out there as to why this is true and why yours ain't, they pick on one and say, oh my God, this ain't what you said last week at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Let me tell you why you are a liar now. And they go off on some other tangent, all away from economics and inflation and that kind of thing. But you gave them that when you're trying to explain and defend and get into the MIT, Harvard, Wharton School of Economics or whatever answer as to why things are the way they are. When Trump won in 2016, the average person that voted for Trump could not spell economics. They didn't know where MIT was, but they told you this guy was the smartest economist on the planet and that kind of thing. It was something else other than the facts that the Democrats were trying to put out there. And Democrats were right about that. But all of the people that bought into that the Democrats were preaching, were already going to vote for the Democrats. They were guys like me and you, Ed, college educated, professors, this, that, and the other. Why are you preaching to us about that kind of stuff? And Republicans knew at that time is that the people who are going to pull the lever, they don't want to hear about that. They want to know about the country being great again. They want to know about some other kind of stuff. They don't want to hear what percentage that the Fed is going to drop the rates by. Wait, what are you talking about? Fed's dropping rates. What the hell does that have to do with me? I'm going to go buy me a house. You're not really understanding that if you're trying to buy a house, you better know what the Feds are going to do with the rates, because that's going to determine what your monthly payments are going to be, and if you can get the mortgage in the first place. Yeah. We are just coming around to understanding this, Ed, when I say we, talking about Democrats, because what we've been talking about ever since Biden said, I'm getting out. we've been talking about non-tangible, non-specific things that resonated in something that Obama started called hope and enthusiasm. And that's what's making it. And it's not the percentage rate that the feds are talking about. If we can stay away from that weed package there, that some of our Democratic people want to get into to explain things to people, if we can stay away from that and stay into hope and the future and your kids and what it means to keep Donald Trump out of the White House, Project 2025, we can stay in that realm, we'll have a chance to win. Once Democrats start trying to explain with numbers and examples and contradictions and that kind of thing, we are going down their road and they're going to start coming back at us.
Yeah. Well, I hear some music in my ear, Val. Let's take a break and we'll come back. There's two other stories that I want to talk about. One is a guy named Mark Robinson, I think he's a buddy of yours. And then the other story I want to talk about is Donald Trump's plan to win the election without having enough votes. So stay right there. We'll be right back after this message.
On the border, the choice is simple. Kamala Harris supports increasing the number of Border Patrol agents. Donald Trump blocked a bill to increase the number of Border Patrol agents. Kamala Harris supports investing in new technology to block fentanyl from entering the country. Donald Trump blocked funding for technology to block fentanyl from entering the country. Kamala Harris supports spending more money to stop human traffickers. Donald Trump blocked money to stop human traffickers. Kamala Harris prosecuted transnational gang members and got them sentenced to prison. Trump is trying to avoid being sentenced to prison. There's two choices in this election: the one who will fix our broken immigration system and the one who's trying to stop her.
So in the weeks to come, I will address in greater detail my plans to build an opportunity economy. And today, I will focus on one element that's on the minds of many Americans as they pay their bills at the kitchen table or walk the aisles of a grocery store. And that is lowering the cost of living. So every day across our nation, families talk about their plans for the future, their ambitions, their aspirations for themselves, for their children. And they talk about how they're going to be able to actually achieve them financially. Because look, the bills add up. Food, rent, gas, back to school clothes, prescription medication. After all that, for many families, there's not much left at the end of the month.
And welcome to our third and final segment of the deal. I'm your host, Ed Clark. That's Val Atkinson. It is Sunday, August 18th. I'm in scorching Topeka, Kansas. Val, it's been 110 some days here. It's oppressive heat and humidity, and I guess, it is what it is. I mean, it seems to be like that all over the country, but it's also hot politically. The politics is heating up in the United States, and we have a shortened election cycle, still not as short as in Britain and France and places like that, where they can call a snap election, 3 weeks is over and you got a new prime minister. We still have things that go on way, way, way too long. You win the presidency and then you start running again, the week after you got elected. But it's same for congressional positions and all that other stuff. And there's a lot of quirks in the American system, Val. The Constitution, for all the stuff, we say about it, about how great it is, and it was a seminal piece of work. It was. For 1789, it was way ahead, right? But for 2024, there's some shit in there that doesn't make any sense at all. And one of those is the Electoral College, but also the whole notion that you can actually be president without nobody really voting, if it comes to that. I mean, because the states really decide how they choose their electors. And then if everything is so contentious that you can't come up with a solution on election day, then there's all these other mechanisms that can lead to there being a president. I went back, Val, and looked at the first election for president, and it was nothing like what we did. You know, people got in the room, they were like, well, you know, this George Washington guy, I think he should be president. It's okay. Well, all right. Y'all agree over there? Yeah. Your electors agree over there? Yeah. Okay. Well, George Washington, you're president.
Yeah.
And that was it. Essentially, that was it. And then, of course, by the time you get to the third term for president of the United States, you're in the early 1800s, and people go, oh, wait a minute. We need to have some more organized and people go to the ballot box. But it's still white men with money and land that were going to the ballot box who would choose their elector that would still show up in D.C. or where in their state capital, that is, still show up in their state capital. They vote, and then they send their vote in. So, Val, what am I getting at here? What I'm getting at is Donald Trump has a lot of people around him who have been trying to figure out how to skirt around this whole election process in the first place. If you remember, they could go on trial in Georgia if they ever let it happen, or Michigan or Arizona for fake electors. That they were trying to send in paperwork saying, hey, well, you know, these people are the real electors. and they're going to vote for Trump, even though the state had counted all the votes and Donald Trump lost. So let's talk about something called the 12th Amendment, Val. You know, again, we like to do history here and we like to do facts. Tell me what the 12th Amendment says about all of this and why we should be concerned that there's people in Trump's camp that think they figured a way around having people go to the polls and vote.
Oh, boy. The 12th Amendment basically was put into effect because the framers were afraid that without it, a lot of the southern states that depended upon slavery may opt out of the Union because they would not have a way to protect themselves against the anti-slavery crowd in the North. So here we go again, trying to put something in the Constitution that will mollify the feelings of the slaveholders. And the 12th Amendment was about that. Okay, what are we going to do? We will not allow the people to directly elect the president. I thought this was a democracy. Yeah, it is going to be a democracy, but we won't allow the people to do it. Well, what about governors? No, we can't allow governors. We don't have that many. Well, I know, let's let the legislators at the state level elect the president. I don't know about that. Somebody in the corner says, I got it. So why don't we come up with electors? Every state, based on who won, will have two sets of electors. And whoever wins the popular vote, then they send that slate of electors to Washington to cast the votes for that entire state for their candidate. Oh, that sounds pretty good. Let's do that. What will we call this? It's like a college, you know, the Electoral College, okay? All right. So what if these people change their mind, these electors? Well, we'll put something in there that's called faithless electors. You can't be faithless. You got to vote the same way that your state authorized or told you to vote. If not, you are a faithless elector. many states have different ways that they deal with faithless electors. You can be punished, incarcerated, and you can be slapped on the wrist. Your vote can go forward. Your vote can be challenged. Your vote can be changed, can be taken away. Depends upon the state. There was a court case called Chiavallo v. Washington that sort of answered or dealt with this whole thing about faithless electors, because one of the electors wanted to, they didn't want to, they cast their ballot in 2016 for Colin Powell. And the state of Washington wanted to say that that was a faithless elector because the electors were supposed to cast their vote for Hillary Clinton. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court basically said, you have to cast your vote to whomever your state says you have to cast your vote to. But that didn't stop that whole business of having fake electors, which you alluded to after a while. Who determines who the real electors are? Well, the way it's supposed to happen is that after the popular vote has been determined by the Secretary of State and the governor, and whatever your state legislature said is their official vote counter, and you call up the Republican Party or the Democratic Party and said it appears that your candidate has won. So you send your electors to Washington to cast your vote and vote on December the 14th, because that's when the Electoral College actually votes, and not in November when the rest of us vote, okay? And it'll be certified, and we'll send a copy to Washington, and you take a copy with you, and all of those other kind of things will be just fine. That's how it's supposed to work. No, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm gonna cut some corners here. What the Republicans have figured out is that, well, what happens on January the 6th? January the 6th is when these votes have to be certified, and the vice president has to read these things to the House and the Senate. Suppose the vice president sees some problems and just refuses to do so. So the Trump administration said, that's our ticket. We'll just tell Pence, don't certify it, okay? And let's go up there and make sure it doesn't happen. Well, Pence called a lot of people and they told him, you have to certify it. So then that's when Trump says, well, I don't know about that. We need to go up there and stop this steal. We need to send the people up there. Well, Ed, there is another problem here in people's worrying. They worry about a lot of stuff, but you got another one to worry about now. That may also happen on January 6th of 2025, okay? But there's another step that happens before then. Remember, I talked about December the 14th. That's when the certification supposedly takes place before the vote. The vote is on the 14th. And 8 days prior to that is when states have an opportunity to say, I have a problem, or I don't. It's almost like crossover. And at that particular time, is when state legislatures say, I cannot certify these votes. I cannot send my people to Washington on the 14th to vote in the Electoral College. That's a state decision. And if enough states say that they don't have the right to certify this, then nobody can reach the magical figure of 270. That's what you need to become president, because enough states did not certify their votings. Nobody got any votes from state X or state Y. So 270 is not out there, okay? So what happens if nobody gets 270? People always talk about 269 apiece. That's fine. Nobody gets 270. What happens? It's called a contentious election. It goes to the House. Each state has one electoral college, one vote. So Ohio and Wyoming and California and New York are all the same. One vote. And as it stands right now, if it went to the electoral college, it went to a contentious election between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, Donald Trump would win 30-21. Now that's 51, I know. But in this case, the 23rd Amendment made it so that DC is counted as a state. So that would be 51. You need 26 of those entities to win in that contentious election. So you need 26 to win, and there are 30 states that would line up behind Republicans, 21 for the Democrats. Donald Trump becomes the 47th president of the United States.
Well, so Val, I'm buying my ticket now, just in case I have to leave, because that's a scary proposition. But here's the truth, Val. That's always been the case for as long as we've been alive. And,
Right.
and what part of the issue and part of the reason why we do this show and the other things we've done over our lifetime, you written books and me too, and all the stuff that we've done, is to try to educate people. Because I don't think people have any clear thinking about how this all works. That I'm looking at the 12th Amendment right here out of my corner of my eye here, and it says, they were trying to fix a problem from the very second election. They knew that they had a problem after the second election.
Mm-hmm.
Then it only took two to figure out that you could have had a vice president from one party and a president from another party. So they tried to fix that. And then 1876 was another very fraught election. And then we know that there's been multiple times where the person with the most popular vote has not been the president of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Ask George Bush. He can tell you. He was president twice. And he didn't win the popular vote. So I'd say that to say, Val, that I'm glad we're talking about it. I hope it doesn't come to that. But it's always been the case that it could happen. Mm-hmm. And because we don't teach civics and we don't talk about civics, all kind of things, strange things are possible, whether they happen or not. Well, in this case, you got somebody who has an incentive to throw this into a contentious election. Donald Trump does not want to go to jail. He's been convicted. Mm-hmm. And Kamala Harris has talked about it on the campaign trail. She talks about her opponent who has been convicted and is still subject to trial in multiple jurisdictions. He does not want to go to jail. The only thing that keeps him out is for him to be president so he can pardon himself and other people that are around him. We'll leave it at that since you scared the bejesus out of everybody. And talk about one last story before we go. And I know it seems like we've been talking about North Carolina a lot, but one is because we live there, but two, because it is extremely important this time. Not that it's not important all the time, but why it's extremely important is because of this guy. Here's a clip of Mark Robinson.
I'm Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, here with my wife, Yolanda. In recent days, a Facebook post I made 10 years ago has resurfaced where I referenced paying for an abortion. Over 33 years ago, before we were married and before we had kids, we had an abortion. It was the hardest decision we have ever made. And sadly, we made the wrong one.
Well, we've talked about Mark Robinson a lot. He is a Black storefront preacher from Greensboro who made his claim to fame going to Guilford County board meetings and ranting about gun rights when the Guilford County board didn't have anything to do with the Second Amendment. So he became the darling of the right and people started supporting him. And then on top of that, he's an evangelical. So he's spoken at all these big white evangelical churches throughout Western North Carolina. And then somehow he becomes lieutenant governor. By lightning struck and this man became lieutenant governor, which made him the de facto candidate for the Republicans for governor, because there were two people who ran against him in the primary that, had one of them decided to run, would probably have beaten Mark Robinson. But the other one would not drop out, and I think it had something to do with vanity on their part, and gives us Mark Robinson. Now, he's behind in every poll that I've seen. But again, I don't trust polls in North Carolina. Ask Harvey Gantt, the senator from North Carolina. Oh, wait a minute. He was not the senator, because Jesse Hales won, right? Mark Robinson has flip-flopped on abortion, but so have all the Republicans. They're now talking about, well, it's a states thing, and whatever states decide, whatever. Mark Robinson knows that he has talked openly about banning abortions. And then in the clip we saw was him and his wife talking about the fact that she had an abortion many years ago, and yada, yada, yada. Because we know he's talked about it and written about it. He can't take it back. So here's the thing. What are Mark Robinson's chances of fixing the problems he's caused for himself by, one, running off at the mouth, and then two, he comes and does this ad? Does this ad do anything to help him try to rectify what's going on, or is it too late for him? And then does this help Josh Stein, who is running against him, and also by default Kamala Harris, because in the statewide races, Democrats can win in North Carolina because they have. So the Mark Robinson problem for the Republicans, what is it? And does this ad help fix any of it?
Well, it doesn't help at all. It's too late. It's too late for Mark Robinson. He cast his die when he made that commercial about women not being able to keep their skirts down. The other side, the Democrats, ran that back so many times. He got so much free ad off of that he wished he could take it off. He'd pay to take it off the air, but it was too late. And that's what cast his fate at that particular time. A lot of people had already made up their mind they'll never vote for Mark Robertson. The other thing is, sorry, we have to be saying this in 2024, but there are still people in North Carolina and all around the country that will not vote for a black man, regardless of what. Okay, so he's got that problem. The other problem he's got is that he's not a good campaigner. He does not know how to run a campaign. So he's just bringing up lots of problems that don't even have to be. On the other side of that ticket, though, Ed, Mr. Stein, Josh Stein, is very fortunate, I believe, that he's running against Mark Robertson, because I could think of a lot of people, go back to the last credible Republican candidate we had, or the last governor we had, McCrory, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. Josh Stein would be having a problem with somebody like that right now, because he's not running a very healthy campaign, in my opinion. He's not running a healthy campaign at all. All you heard from and about Josh Stein is that he's pro-law enforcement. What else do you know about Josh Stein? He's pro-law enforcement and that he's not Mark Robertson. Tell me something else you know about Josh Stein. Nothing.
Well, I'm glad I'm not Mark Robertson either. But you're right, Val. Josh Stein does maybe the most fortunate gubernatorial candidate in North Carolina history. If I can think, I'm thinking back to the last however many elections I've been alive, and I have not seen a mismatch like this in terms of who the candidate is for governor on one party side being so inept that you almost don't have to run a campaign against them. Everybody else has been either long-term person in the legislature, whatever, from either side, right? Or attorney general, whatever. And Mark Robinson, he was some dude that would speak at Guilford County commissioner meetings about guns. And he had a storefront church in Greensboro, and then had a daycare center that apparently you wouldn't want your monkey to be there, right? So North Carolina, I tell people all the time, I love being in North Carolina. I think it's a unique place. But I travel all the time, right? Like I said, I'm in Kansas, Oklahoma, Iowa this week, and one of the things that is clear is that there's still a lot of Trump support out here. I've seen plenty of Trump flags since I've been here. I haven't seen as many in North Carolina. North Carolina is purple. These places I'm right now, they're redder than red. And you don't get very many people who are willing to speak out to say that they're not red. But so it's going to be interesting. Val, we're about to run out of time. So as I always ask you, anything we need to have our eyes on this week, anything you want to tell us?
Well, just stay vigilant. Make a plan for how you're going to go down and vote. Check your voter registration regularly. I don't care if you're a 20, 30, 40-year voter and has never missed a time to vote. Go online or go down in person or call, whatever you got to do. Make sure you verify and validate that you are still on the roll. The day of the election, November the 5th, is not a good time to find out that you've been removed from the roll. It's a bad time. So check it out. You got 3 times to do that. You got to do it on the 1st of September, the 1st of October, and the 1st of November. And the last thing I want you to do is to take somebody with you. That guy who's always running around the community telling everybody how often he votes and that kind of thing. Tell him that you want to offer him a free ride this time to the polls, okay? Take him and his best buddy and then somebody you don't know. Get a car full and take them to the polls with you. And even after you do that, come back to the community and see if anybody else needs a ride. It's a full work day.
Yeah.
Make sure you do everything you got to do on that day. You got to put in a full day's work. So that's my charge to you between now and the 5th of November.
Yeah, well, even if Leroy talks too much, ride in the car with him that day.
Yeah.
We need Leroy to get down to the polls. Well, Val, again, I appreciate everybody who's stuck around for the whole hour. We keep growing audience. Every time I look at the numbers, there's more people and they're from all kinds of places. So I really appreciate that. Clearly, some people don't like what we say, Val, but they're actually listening as they send me ugly emails, and which is fine. Because I think if they listen to the segment we just did about the 12th Amendment and they go, really? That's how that works? They know that we're not here BSing people, that we actually take the time to do the research and know what's going on. So again, I appreciate everybody who's shared the link, who subscribed to the RSS feed, so on and so forth. And there's more exciting stuff coming up. Val and I have been doing this a long time. We do it because we believe it's the right thing to do. So anyway, go out and do something good for somebody today, and I really do mean that. And we'll see you again in the next edition of The Deal. Talk to you later. Bye.